Here's Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad's Guide to Wealth.
I'm going to get into a thing my rich dad talked about. It's called the game of money. And the reason we say it as a game is very simply because of this. And some of you may not be sports fans, but I love sports. In football, a game is consistent of 4 quarters. And so my rich dad said life is also, your financial life is in 4 quarters also. So if we can have it up here on the prompter, on the plasma, the game of money, we have a thing called the pregame show. Okay? And the next thing is we go into the first quarter. So age 25 is generally when most of us kind of get out of school and we sort of figure out what we're going to do. So age 25 to 35 is the first quarter. And the way we come up with this is 10 years is because our working life is generally 40 years long, 25 to 65, right? So the first quarter is 25 to 35. Then what happens, second quarter is 35 to 45. Got it? You know, things like this. And by then, you should be married, or if you want to be married, your career should be taking off, and you have a house, and a little bit in debt, and all this stuff. And then we go into halftime, you know. And at that point, sometimes in our lives, it's called midlife crisis, you know. We say, oh, my goodness, I'm not getting ahead, I'm not getting promoted, I'm not getting ready, and a panic sets in. And then we go into the third quarter, which is 45 to 55, okay? And then ages 55 to 65 is the fourth quarter. And if you haven't acquired enough wealth, like I talked about, that's between wealth and being rich. Wealth is very simply measured in time. So we have recurring income coming in for as long as you live here. So if you don't have enough recurring income from wealth, you go into what's called overtime. And overtime means that you may be on Social Security, or as my Japanese friend said, oh, Social Security, you know, because it's so. Is that if you haven't quite got it yet, overtime means, would you like that supersized? Would you like a giant-sized Coca-Cola with it or stuff like this? And then you go into what's called out of time. And I think this is why people are terrified right now of running out of money during retirement, because when you're out of time, that oftentimes your body gives up and all this. And a lot of times what people say is that you spend your health gaining wealth. And in the last few years of your life, you spend your wealth trying to hang on to your health. And they say so many people, their fortunes get wiped out in the last 2 years of their lives if they don't have enough. And as I said, the biggest problem in America is not Social Security, it's Medicare. $64 trillion in debt right now. So so that's why I said I thank all of you who were born, you know, after 1964, because you're going to be paying for all the old guys who are out of time, especially right now. Pre-game show, you know, Paris Hilton was born, I think, with $300 million net worth. She won the game before she was born, you know. How many people wish you were, you know, born rich or all that kind of stuff? You know, I always did, but I wasn't. So there are certain people who were born with a silver spoon in the mouth, and they were so fortunate. I wasn't. My wife, Kim, won her game in the first quarter of her life. She was about 35 years old when she retired. She had acquired enough wealth, enough passive income, that she never had to work again. So she won the game first quarter, and I was 47, so I won it just in the second quarter of my life. That meant I never had to work again. Not that I was rich, but I was wealthy. I had money coming in every month from my investments, and I never had to work again. So then I took 2 years off, suffered my midlife crisis, and then came back. And when I was 50 years old, I wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the thing took off and a whole new career opened up. And now I'm in the fourth quarter of my life, and thank God I don't have to worry about going into overtime or out of time. Because acquiring wealth is just fun for me. I love investing. It's not frightening. It's control. I have all that. Does that make sense, you guys here? It's just fun. So my question is to you right now is, what quarter are you in? How many people are in the first quarter? Okay. How many people second quarter? How many people third quarter? Fourth quarter? Nobody's raising their hand on that one. A couple of you. And I won't ask about overtime and out of time, but the question is this. Sometime, like it or not, every single one of us needs to win the game. Regardless of who you are, we need to win the game. If we don't, we go into this part over here. So with that, I want to bring up my sweetheart, my darling, my best friend. It's almost 20 years of marriage right now. That's my sweetheart, Kim. Kim has her own corporations. I have my own corporations. If we ever split, she's completely independent. She has control of her own life. Does that make sense, you guys here? So that's what I love about her.
When I married Robert, we got together. He had no money. And matter of fact, we celebrated when we hit zero. That's how far down we were. Robert's been talking about control, and I love to encourage women into this world of investing, because I think so many women today feel out of control when it comes to money, when it comes to their financial freedom and their financial lives. And so my passion is to educate and encourage women in the world of investing. And the reason why I'm so driven kind of comes from an incident that happened many, many years ago. And what it was is I was 14 years old, and I remember coming home from school one day, and I walked in, and there was my mom and her best friend in our dining room. And I walked in, and Mom kind of signaled me to, no, leave him alone, leave him alone. And so I walked away into the kitchen, and I listened to the conversation, and my mom's friend was very distraught. She was crying, she was upset, and it turned out that her husband was leaving her for a younger woman. And she went on and on. They'd been married for 20-some years and kept listening. And then she said something that just really hit home to me. And she said, you know, my marriage hasn't been good for many, many years, but at least I was financially taken care of. And my mom said, well, that's why you stayed? She said, I stayed because I didn't know how to take care of myself financially. So at 14 years old, I decided I was never going to be dependent on someone else for my financial well-being. And that was a decision, and that's why I'm so driven now to encourage women into this game as well. And so when Robert talks about control, I really believe that it's time that women today take control of their financial lives. I think it's crucial. I don't think it's a luxury or a good idea anymore. I think it's something that has to happen. And, you know, the times have changed. And what worked for our mothers and our grandmothers is not necessarily going to work for us and our daughters and our granddaughters. And I came across some startling statistics recently that show how much times have changed. For example, in the U.S., 47% of women over the age of 50 are single, meaning they are responsible for their financial well-being. And many of us have heard the divorce rate. 1 out of 2 marriages ends in divorce. So if she was depending on Prince Charming to take care of her, well, and who usually ends up with the children? The woman. So the woman is now responsible for herself and for her children. And the first year after a divorce, on average, a woman's standard of living drops 73%. And for any of you that are concerned about your mothers or your grandmothers, of the elderly living in poverty, 3 out of 4 are women. But the amazing thing is 80% of those women were not poor when their husbands were alive. So what the statistics are telling me is that as women, especially as we get older, we have not been prepared, we have not been educated to take care of ourselves financially, and now is the time to do that. And it doesn't take a lot. It's really just through education, and that's why I'm so happy to be part of this program on PBS, because they're all about education. And to get started in this world of investing, it takes education. Start small, you know, make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Put a little money down. You'll be amazed at how smart you get when you put a little money down on an investment. Your education goes through the roof. So again, it's just about education. And just to let you know, it's not rocket science. You know, I don't have a special degree. It doesn't take any special type of formal training. When I started in investing, it was in 1989, and Robert came to me, said, it's time you start investing. And I'm like, I don't even know what the word means. And so he started to teach me what his rich dad taught him about investing. And I went out, and I'm stumbling along trying to figure it out, and finally I came across this little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in a place called Portland, Oregon. And I signed the papers, and I got the deal, and I'm doing all my due diligence now, and I'm checking it out to see if I'm going to do it or not. And I'll tell you, I was scared to death. What if the tenant moves out? What if the plumbing breaks? What if I lose money? What if? I was scared to death. And what happened is when it came time to close the papers, to sign the papers, my hand was shaking so bad they couldn't even make out my signature. But the other thing that happened is my fist was so tightly clenched around my $5,000 check that I had to part with that they thought they'd never get it. But I did that deal, and I went on to do the next deal and next deal, and I kept learning, and I kept learning as I went. And what it came down to is today I control millions of dollars worth of real estate and worth of property. But it all came down to, it started with a little education, and it started with that first step. So I just want to say, again, I so encourage women in this game of investing. It's not difficult. It takes some time. It takes some effort. It takes some education. But the freedom, for me, when I understood this game, my self-worth went up. My confidence went up. I knew for the first time that I could take care of myself. I didn't have to depend on Robert. I didn't need Robert. I wanted Robert, but I didn't need him. And that made a huge difference. So one final statistic. Only 20%, studies show that only 20% of baby boomer women will be financially secure in retirement. That means 80% of us will not. So again, I thank you for being at this PBS show, because by being here, you're getting yourself educated, and all it takes is education and some action, and you can be easily be part of that 20% who's secure and in control. Thank you.
The last thing I want to talk about here is this, is that I realized as I studied education, it came across, I started studying education at a later time when I was about 38 years old, and I realized that each and every one of us was a genius, except in school. There are certain people, like I had a classmate who was considered a genius in school. This guy could do quantum physics and all that when he was in kindergarten. The trouble is he couldn't tie his shoelaces. How many people knew people like that? You know, they're absolute, and they are geniuses in school, but in the real world, they're incompetent. This guy didn't know his left hand from his right hand. You know, we used to play baseball, and I said, how can he be a genius? He doesn't know. He could never figure out with the glove went in his left hand or his right hand. But he was a genius. You know, I said, how can he be a genius? He can't pitch, can't bat, you know, it's like this. So I started to realize that genius, that every one of us had it. And what genius stands for is this here. The genie, the magic. And so what I say to this is this, you know, God created every animal on earth, every species, to have a special advantage. For instance, birds can fly, cheetahs run fast, and cockroaches, you can't kill them. You know? So if animals have special advantages, so does each and every one of us. For example, Tiger Woods is a genius in the environment called the golf course. Tiger Woods would not be a genius as a jockey. He's just too big. I would definitely not be a jockey, you know what I mean, like this? And you look at Mick Jagger. He went to school to be an accountant, but he became a billionaire as a Rolling Stone. The thing I want to leave you with tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is have the courage to find that environment, like Tiger Woods on the golf course, Mick Jagger as a Rolling Stone, Oprah in front of television. Find that spot where your genius comes out. That's what intelligence is. My genius was crushed in school. I was labeled stupid and dyslexic and no attention and jumping around all the time. My genius did not come out in the corporate world. I do not like being told what to do and kissing you-know-what to get the corporate ladder. I do not do that stuff well. I do well on the streets. Does that make sense, you guys here? That's where my genius came out. And the other thing is that I flunked out of school twice because I could not write. And I do not read that well yet. But only, you know, no, it's true. I flunked when I was 15 and I flunked out when I was 17. And today I have one of the top 3 books in the history of the New York Times. I've been on the New York Times bestseller list for over 5 years now. Only 2 books have beat me. One of them is The Joy of Sex. That might take a while to beat. So when I flunked out of school, you know, and now I have a New York Times bestseller for 5 years, I'm still a lousy writer. People say, you can't write. I say, you sound like my English teacher, you know. I did graduate. I have a Bachelor of Science degree and all that. I went to a very prestigious school here in New York. But the point here is this. That's not, you have to find where your genius comes out. That makes sense, you guys here? And after I flunked out of school and then this book became, I was scarred for the longest time. I really thought I was stupid. It pained me. Here's my father, the superintendent of education, and his son's a moron. You know what I mean? It's all this. So what I'm thinking about, if those school teachers are still alive, I'm going to look them up on 1-800-SEARCH or something. I'm going to find their names. I'm going to mail them a copy of my book, page by page, say, here it is. But the point here is this. I didn't find what I was good at until I had the courage to find the environment where my genius came out. Does that make sense, you guys here? And I ask you to do that. Intelligence is don't do as you're told. Go where you know your genius can come out. It's not easy. Tiger Woods practices like a wild man to get his genius to come out. I practice like I write like crazy. I'm not a good writer. Does that make sense, you guys here? It's not easy. If you think it's easy, this is not it. But you and every one of you at home, you need to find, or I recommend finding where your genius lies. What environment do you come the best in? Because if you look at this picture over here of this young boy, I think this is really it. That's really what it is. Every child is born with a genius. I did not know when I was 9 years old playing Monopoly that I was seeing the future. When I played Monopoly, I saw that I could become a rich man. Whereas my poor dad kept saying, go back to school. So I'd like to leave you with this. Have the courage to find that environment. See, the magic lamp is your environment. Tiger Woods, golf course. Mick Jagger, Rolling Stone. Oprah, television. Have the courage to find that environment where you rub the magic lamp and your genius comes out. The most important thing is do what you know God gave you the best genius for. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.